Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh was found guilty for the murder of his wife and son earlier this year and is currently incarcerated. Today we're going to be watching his sentencing for 22 financial crimes that he recently pled guilty to. Before we get started with this analysis, I do want to remind you that nothing that we talk about today is a psychological evaluation. These are just my opinions based on his behavior and his body language, and these are all publicly available. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. While Alex Murdaugh was originally charged with over 100 financial crimes, he recently pled guilty to 22 of them. What we're looking at today is his sentencing. Let's just jump right in.
We started to go through this morass of documents and financial
So right now we're watching fairly early on in the sentencing, but there's a couple of things I want you to pay attention to. One, if you look at Alex Murdaugh, he looks quite different than he did last time we saw him, depending on how closely you've been following this case, that is. Because shortly after he was initially found guilty, he shaved his head, which gave him a very different look. This does give him a softer look to have grown his hair back out again. So let's see what his body language says today.
Documents and bank statements and checks. And again, I have a lot of the state grand jury staff sitting here. I've mentioned my co-counsel Johnny James and our forensic accountant Carson Burney a couple of times, who are also very instrumental in those early days in going through those. And we work very hard. But I do have to say that...
Now, one thing that you'll notice is he does look around a lot, he's blinking a lot, but he's not moving as much as he oftentimes does. One thing that we've seen from him in various hearings, I haven't really covered the hearings as much since he was found guilty, but through various hearings, he does tend to sway a lot. He bounces a lot. He does seem to have a hard time sitting still. But right now, he's reining it in pretty well. I'll be curious if he's able to do that over the course of several hours of this hearing.
There's another conservatorship, Malik Williams, that substantial monies went to. But, Your Honor, if you flip over to the last page of that exhibit...
So what we're going to do is we're going to skip ahead to some of the victim statements, because at this point, Alex Murdaugh actually isn't giving us a whole lot. He's not reacting as much as he typically does. So let's see what it's like once people are talking about the ways that they were impacted by his behavior.
Doing 85% of his time so that these fine people don't have to get up on the stand and be victimized over and over again, subjected to humiliating cross-examination. I think the finality of that is good, because I'm confident in a lot of the dominoes falling where they should. Don't forget, Judge Gergel still has a sentence coming.
Now, this is interesting. You notice he's sitting and shaking his head. And so this is a way of him protesting what's being said right now. Even though he's embraced the idea of this guilty plea, even though he's made a plea deal, it seems that when we're getting to the victim impact statements, we're seeing a bit more of a reaction. But watch him shake his head right here.
Yeah, Judge Gergel still has a sentence coming. And it could be a consecutive sentence.
For God's sake, all that was ever asked of the man is that you wake up and be Alex Murdaugh every day. To have taken it so afoul is hard to reconcile. He's made his behavior complicated, but we figured out what he's done. He's tried to hide his true nature from us, but we figured out who he is. So the only question we're left with is why. And I'll suggest to the court this answer. It doesn't matter, because the only person who can answer that question is Alex Murdaugh, and he's demonstrated himself to be quite the cunning liar.
Now, one thing you'll notice is he's swaying right now, very subtly. You may not actually notice this, but I can tell his body's moving a bit. And once again, this is because he just can't sit still. You oftentimes see when he stands, he bounces. When he sits, he sways his feet. You just constantly see this motion, and he has this restless energy. Even when he's not listening to people talk about him or talk to him, he does seem like he has such a hard time sitting still. I'm going to go back for just a second. Just watch his body motion. Like, look at his shoulders. You'll see what I'm talking about.
The question is Alex Murdaugh, and he's demonstrated himself to be quite the cunning
sort of a subtle swaying motion, but that just shows that he is constantly bouncing up and down.
Liar. Your Honor, in the opening, I heard Mr. Arputlian say something about
Gloria worked very hard for you for 20 years, you and your family. She loved Buster and Paul as her own. She loved Maggie, and she trusted and loved you wholeheartedly.
So when you see him biting his lip, oftentimes we do things around the mouth to self-soothe. We pacify ourselves because there's a lot of nerves in the mouth. So oftentimes when we see people trying to calm themselves down, that's where you're going to see a lot of action. But watch this again, then we'll keep going.
She loved Maggie, and she trusted and loved you wholeheartedly. She considered you and your family as her own family.
Testify at the grand jury or have their name public or their face public. And there's a lot to be said for that. Today.
So as you can see right here, chewing on the inside of his lip, he's got so much anxious energy. That's what we're seeing right now more than anything. Earlier, when people were talking about things that were highly emotional, you could see him tearing up a little bit. Always hard to know whether that's genuine or not, because I still don't think we've ever actually seen tears from Alex Murdaugh through the last trial or through any of this. So it's a little bit hard to know whether or not some things are performative. But right here, you're seeing what seems to be a really anxious response, a really stressed response. And that could just be because he's been sitting for so long. Because like I said, he doesn't seem to sit still very well. But you see him chewing the inside of his mouth. Watch this again. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Or their face public. And there's a lot to be said for that. Today will make our system better. It will bring closure.
Don't practice in this courtroom in terms of criminal defense cases. I don't understand why.
So if you look at his brow right here, this is what we associate with sadness. What we're not seeing is anything like anger. And sometimes during sentencing hearings, we do see anger. Now, granted, he was more in control of this one because he's the one who pled guilty ultimately, and he's the one that made the deal here. But it doesn't change the fact that we're not seeing him show amusement, anger, or anything like that. What we're seeing in the brow, whether it's intentional or not, is sadness.
The label of a white-collar crime is given to these crimes.
I wanted to sit down with you one-on-one when I found out what you did.
So as you can see right here, his eyes look a bit glazed over. He looks like he's about to cry. It looks like he's on the verge of that. However, we also saw that during his last trial, and I don't think he ever actually cried. I don't think he ever actually produced tears. So it's always so hard to know with Alex Murdaugh whether or not the way that he looks is a manipulation, whether or not he actually is moved by what's being said.
I just wonder why. I can say, oh, excuse me. The money you stole from me, you could have asked me for it and I would have gave it to you if that's how I felt about you and your family. You didn't have to steal it from me, man.
So he just said, I believe that, and he's shaking his head. The one thing I will give Alex Murdaugh is it's always hard to know whether or not he's being sincere, but there's nothing that he's saying right now that's going to be harmful to any of the victims. He does seem to be listening to what they're saying to him for the most part. He does seem to be responding appropriately and respectfully. So I do give him that. In terms of the authenticity of his emotions, it's anybody's guess because his behavior is not so different than when he was on trial.
I want each of you that spoke to know that I listened to you. I heard you. Your pain.
So as you can see right now, he's raising his eyebrows up. He does this to bring attention to his face when he's talking about this. He wants his audience to hear this right now. He's used to talking in front of people. So this is Alex Murdaugh in his element, really. He does know how to speak. So you're going to see that kind of body language when he has the opportunity to talk in front of people.
Your pain and your hurt is palpable.
So having this chance to talk to everybody, having this audience, we did see him lick his lips a second ago. And oftentimes that suggests some level of excitement. So he may be enjoying getting a chance to present this to everybody.
To know that I listened to you. I heard you. I did terrible things. Things that I'm thinking about right now. Caused me to be hurt. Caused me to be disturbed.
When you have somebody who has been found guilty of a double murder, when you have somebody who has committed this many financial crimes, it is going to be very difficult to trust them again. It's going to be very difficult to say, yes, this person is being authentic and I can trust what they're saying and I can trust they actually feel guilty about the things they've done, because this is the same face he probably had when he was doing these things before, when he was taking advantage of people. As you've noticed, his mouth is very, very active as he's speaking right now. Once again, that was similar during the trial. And typically we associate that dry mouth with either excitement or stress. But it's interesting to see just the sheer volume of mouth movements that he has.
JJ. I felt as close to you as anybody. I still do. And I hope you know that. And I hope you know that I mean what I say here today.
So once again, one of the challenges is that he sniffs a lot. He appears sad, lip quivers, his eyes look red, but we still have yet to see a single tear. And it's not that everybody has to cry all the time, but it is unusual that I don't think he's ever cried with any of this. And so it does put into question the degree of authenticity around what emotions he feels. Now, I don't want to just be critical of him because what he's saying is important, I think. I think that what he's saying to the victims is important. But you always have to be so careful around people that you know are manipulators. You always have to be careful to go, okay, can I trust them this time? Is this time the one time that they actually are being authentic, even though they've lied all these other times? You've got to be very, very careful with that. Once again, I don't want it to be a double bind for Alex Murdaugh that he can't say anything right, because he is saying what he's supposed to say. But I do think in terms of whether or not the emotions are genuine is a much harder thing to accept. So I've skipped ahead a good bit because he does go on for quite a long time. A lot of the body language we see is the same. Sometimes his eyes get red. Oftentimes he's licking his lips. The behavior ultimately is very similar to what we saw when he was on trial, but I want to show a couple more parts of this.
I'd like to say to any and everyone who's suffering from addiction, please get professional help. Don't let pride get in your way the way I did.
So I think this is a very powerful message. I think that it's really great that he's saying this. I hope that it affects at least one person out there to hear this, and that it will affect change for them in some way.
Do as much good as possible and help as many people as I can while I'm incarcerated.
I really genuinely do hope that he is able to affect positive change for people and people that are incarcerated. He does have the kind of personality where he can connect with people. Unfortunately, he used that to manipulate before. Hopefully, he's able to do that in a more positive way and help people in a positive way. Now we're going to go into the actual sentencing.
But you have one 20-year sentence and a consecutive 7-year sentence for a total sentence of 27 years. Most of the offenses pled to are serious offenses under the law, subjects you to the three strikes law. You are given credit for time served pursuant to Section 241340 to be calculated by the South Carolina Department of Corrections.
So as you saw, after he got that sentence, you see him look down like this. Watch this right here.
South Carolina Department.
So oftentimes we see that as a loss of confidence. Obviously, pleading guilty to this many crimes, he may have anticipated that he was going to get all 27 years that they were pursuing. But since he did, that may have made him lose confidence because he may have hoped that there would be some degree of clemency, that there would be some degree of mitigating some years off of it, which it doesn't seem like it happened for him. So this is a look of losing confidence. He may be disappointed with the outcome.
Department of Corrections.
You can also see him clenching his jaw, which we also oftentimes associate with either anger or frustration.
South Carolina Department of Corrections. I think that completes the sentence. Anything further?
So we'll go ahead and stop things here. Hopefully this has helped you better understand some of the body language we've been seeing with Alex Murdaugh. It's very difficult because on the one hand, he is saying things that are important, that are powerful, that the victims need to hear. And I definitely think he should say those things. But what's dangerous is trusting somebody that has done the things that Alex Murdaugh has done. Whether it's the murders that he's been found guilty of, or whether it's the crimes that he did towards these victims. Ever feeling like you could trust somebody that can do this is a dangerous thing. But you do have to be very, very careful, trusting that somebody like this is being authentic. So in time, I'll be curious if he ultimately gets a retrial. For today, though, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. And before we get finished up, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.